Hello everyone, it's a great pleasure to be here in Gothenburg. It's my third time in Gothenburg for another conference, but this is my first time here for foss-north. So I would like to use this opportunity to thank foss-north organizers to opening the venue to me to talk about this very important topic, also particular to Henrik and Tobias, who did also the admin. So yeah, I'm very happy. So my name is Lasota, and I work for the Free Software Foundation Europe. And I have a legal background, and in parallel to my work to the FSFE, I'm also a legal scholar, research at the University of Halle, Wittenberg in Germany, where I'm currently researching interoperability, but in the past I've been working also with telecom as well. But today, I would like to talk with you, to introduce you to a topic that perhaps in your work you are already quite familiar on the technical aspects, which is interoperability, but I would like to bring the legal perspective to it. So what is happening right now in the EU, the European Union, on the regulatory aspect to interoperability, and why some companies are pushing very hard back against such regulation, and why this is important for free and open source software, why this is important for free software. Therefore, today the talk is about some legal cases and also administrative cases that the Free Software Foundation Europe is involved, and I would like to dive a little bit more into it. So, we will talk a little bit about the tech triopoly, or how three persons control 99% of the operating system used in the world. Then I will perhaps together, collectively, we will reflect if we can do something against this tech triopoly, or we are being held hostage, kidnapped by this, and we are not able anymore to run free software on our mobile devices. Of course, spoiler alert, I have a solution for this, or at least a suggestion for this, which we are calling device neutrality. And then we will end this talk with a homework for everyone that is attending this talk, which I would like to invite you to contribute to this project. So let's dive into it, the tech triopoly. I would like to start about this asking a question for this nice audience. Who has an Android mobile phone? Wow, okay, so I think 90% perhaps. Who has iPhone? No judgment, okay, cool. Yeah. I noticed some people raised their hands twice, so we have an Android and iPhone, okay, pretty cool. Who has an Android without Google Play, so de-Googleized, okay, yeah, pretty cool, all right. And who has a Linux phone? Oh wow, nice. That's why I like conference, free software conference, because it's diversified, you know. I've been to legal conference where people just iPhone 100%, you know. But I think this message here will resonate with you a little bit. We are in a very bad situation nowadays. Actually, I would like to come to this. So, as May of 2025, well, the desktop operating system market remained dominated by Microsoft Windows, right? So we have Windows with 75% of the market share globally on the operating system for PCs, right? But when we go to mobile devices, and mobile devices, everyone has nowadays the situation is a little bit different because we have a duopoly in the mobile devices, where we have Google Android here and we have iPhone here. And although many of you raised your hand that you have a de-Googleized Android, or you have a Google without the proprietary elements, perhaps an operating system that is based on Android, but well, we are really on the minority side of it, you know. And I do believe that it's pretty bad, actually, you know. And why is that? Because this enormous power, economical, and which translates into also political power, literally puts in the hand of these three companies, Microsoft, Google, and Apple, freedom of software, so software freedom, right? Because as the three systems are proprietary, although Google was born free and open source, and until today there is the Android open source project. Basically, when we are talking about this dynamic here, we are talking Google with the proprietary layer as well. So, and therefore, when we are talking about these companies with such concentrated market power, we are talking about companies that impose lock-ins on end users. And these users, or even the downstream developers, they have no access to third-party app stores and no interoperability. For example, for those who use iPhone, I'm pretty sure that you are not able to install a completely independent alternative app store. There are some alternative app stores like OutStore, but they are not completely independent. The background, the security checks are still being done by Apple, right? We're going to talk about this in a moment. So everyone in this room, included the one that talks with you, we are here. I'm sorry. We are in this position here. So unfortunately, when it comes to mobile devices, we don't have completely software freedom. And why is this? Why digital markets are so concentrated? So research has been trying to answer this question. And the problem with digital markets are that they work, the digital markets are a kind of network industry, right? And network industry, they are susceptible to network effects. Network effects is the larger the network is, the more valuable it becomes. And in the past, the free software community was very proud of it, right? And we wanted it to do this. But when these companies, they go proprietary and they are able to dominate the market due to extreme network effects, what we are seeing in Android, this plays against us as well, because then the whole value shifts towards the proprietary networks and not on the free ones, right? And as soon as you have control over this network, you can extract data from it, right? So you can build an entire economy over these networks, right? Some philosophers, some scholars are calling even the era that we are living on the surveillance capitalism, because the amount of data that you can extract from these networks are huge, right? And and allied with extreme precarization of labor of the gig economy, then you have a perfect formula for market concentration. And this situation is indeed not philosophically, if you will, complicated. This market concentration, this concentrated economical power has translated also in unfair competitive practice from these companies. And I have listed here some of the examples concerning the triopolis, or the three companies, only in the EU, right? Because these companies also have been facing charges from anti-competitive charges in other places of the world, including the US. But only here on the EU, for example, Google was already fined several times by the European Commission, amounting billions of euros, including due to what they call anti-forking agreements related to Android. Microsoft on the house of millions, and Apple as well. So we are seeing that, law, this area of law, competition law, tried to tackle this issue, but, the problem only surmounted to the term, level that even competition law is not working anymore, and the EU had to think about a solution and say, we are just finding these companies with billions and billions of euros, and this looks like just a tax that they needed to pay in order to have their own business models on this. Perhaps we needed to change the market from the beginning. We needed to restructure the market. And therefore came, in 2022, a new legislation called the Digital Markets Act, which tries to change structurally digital markets, how the dynamics of the market happen. And this law aims only to the very largest companies in Europe, right? They call even, the law calls this company gatekeepers. So even the law call the company gatekeepers because they control access to digital markets, because, well, the entire digital markets, they depend on the infrastructure of these companies. And the law establishes some criteria for a company to be considered gatekeeper. For example, 45 customers in the EU, and other thresholds as well. But for us today, what is important is the subject scope of this law. And this law applies to some platform services, online search engines, operating systems, app stores, cloud services. And when you start reading this law, you say, the obligations are quite, simplistic. We, the free and open source community, when we read this obligation, we wanted to laugh because it's so basic, like obligation to allow app uninstalling and change to default settings. Obligation to allow third-party app stores and side loading, side loading as installation of software. Obligation to allow interoperability with hardware and software features. These are things that we know by default, right? So, you just, if you want to install GNU Linux, you just go and then you download from the internet and then you install in your device and yeah, you're done, not big deal. But remember, as I said here, this concentration of power have created this imposed lock-in that restructuring the market needs to go back to the basics. So the law imposed this type of obligation on these companies. And you say, okay, fine. So then perhaps this law is very easy to comply, right? You just have to allow end users or downstream developers to do these things that they do with GNU Linux since forever. I have bad news for us. This law has been faced by these companies with huge backslash. These companies, they hate the Digital Markets Act. They hate to the point that they have engaged with the North American current administration, the Trump administration, in order to try to revoke this law at all costs. And I didn't quote Trump on the social media saying things about this law, but suffice to say that this law has a sister called the Digital Service Act, because the Digital Markets Act aims at the infrastructure layer of the internet, while the Digital Service Act aims at content layer of the internet. But suffice to say that the officers, the European Commission officers working with the Digital Service Act have been targeted with sanctions from the Trump administration. So the DMA not yet, but the team are expecting something like this, and therefore this administration is treating this law as a discriminatory one against North American corporations, which personally, and the FSFE, the Free Software Foundation Europe, we don't think like that. We don't see this law as European versus North American. No, we see this law as big tech versus small tech. And I do think that this differentiation, big tech versus small tech, matters. I don't think personally. I don't think that the differentiation between North American versus European versus African, South American matters. The free software movement is global, right? Look at our conference. There are people from everywhere. So it's not just people from Sweden. And this is the beauty of our movement. But at the same time, I do think that the monopolization over critical infrastructure is quite bad, and this is something that this law aims to deal. However, there are some as we see, there's some PR around it, pushing this law as discriminatory against a group of nationalistic type approach of companies, which I'm pretty sure that's not the case. Well, so enough of bad news, you know, and let's start looking at the future. Okay, let's start having a more proactive approach to this, and can we do something about it? You know, so now we have this law, and now we are suffering this backlash, and can we do something about it? Well, at the Free Software Foundation Europe, we do believe that we can do something, and we have been working with this concept of device neutrality. Device neutrality is a concept that devices, our smartphones, our laptops, they should be neutral in relation to the software that they are running. You know, and what does it mean to be neutral? It means that we should have the right to have software freedom on our devices. Our smartphones are very powerful, very powerful general-purpose computers, and not having the ability to run and install software on our smartphones, it is very depressing, I would say, because, well, as more that we use, and these devices have become very close to our bodies, to ourselves, therefore, it's crucial, it is vital, and I'm not highlighting this enough, that we need to safeguard software freedom on our devices, be it mobile devices or our laptops. And therefore, a device to be considered neutral, we need to be able to break that lock-ins. We should not be hostage of these companies that and suffer these consequences. We really needed to be able to change our devices as soon as we want. If we are not happy with this operating system, we need to jump to another one. Last but not least, we should have control over our data ourselves. We needed to break this very pervasive dynamics of the surveillance capitalism. So, interesting. Okay, perhaps I'm really sorry, LibreOffice is not happy with something here. Let me see if I'll try to mirror the display here. I'm really sorry for this. Let's see if I can mirror. Interesting, why I cannot see this. Okay, 1 second. Because do you know how to make this to mirror? Okay, let's go to settings here. Here, okay. Let me quickly try to mirror. Okay, so I think it should work now. Okay, perfect. Yeah, sorry for that. I don't know, LibreOffice is not very happy with my, okay. So, yes. Right, so the first thing is that device neutrality is not only just for us a philosophical aspect. We are really working on this. And we are seizing the moment with the European regulators to make device neutrality a reality. So we have been engaged in the last year with more than 10 expert meetings with the European Commission. We have submitted 9 reports and studies to them. We have built alliances with civil society and industry. And last but not least, the juicy part, we have been engaged in strategic litigation and regulatory interventions against some companies that are not complying with this law. And this talk is about this last point. Okay? So, first, I would like to start with the regulatory intervention. Last year, we were in a meeting with the European Commission where Google took part of this, and Google presented their solutions to comply with this law. And remember the slide that I showed that the law imposes on gatekeepers the obligation to uninstall pre-installed software, right? And if you have an Android device in your hand, you see that there is a bunch of pre-installed software, unless you use an Android-based operating system that already does the cleaning for you with this bloatware. But if you buy stock Android, comes with a lot of bloatware pre-installed software, which is not able to uninstall. And Google came and we raised this question to them, and they came with different definitions of uninstalling software, right? And therefore, we together with other civil societies, we submitted a formal complaint to the European Commission aiming at uninstalling under this law is completely removing the app, not just disabling it, right? So we started this process against Google to force them to comply with the law. We also started a campaign, if you will, an initiative for Microsoft, because Microsoft bundles the selling of laptops with Windows devices, Windows operating systems, and end users, consumers, when they buy these devices, they pay for the Windows license. And even if we don't want to use Windows and wanted to run Linux on it, we have paid the license. And therefore, we started this activity called Refund for Freedom, where we help anyone who wants to get the refund of this license back. You know, it's not a lot of money, but it's a matter of principles. It's 30 euros, it's 40 euros, but we don't want people to pay for a license that they don't use. And the FSFE has a volunteer, Luca Bonici, who inspired us to do this activity, who has been suing several manufacturers, Lenovo, Acer, and many other manufacturers who do not comply with this request of giving back the license fees. In one of the cases, pretty inspiring case, the judge in Italy decided against Lenovo for moral compensation damages for 20,000 euros, and Luca Bonici donated 15,000 euros to the FSFE to help us in this campaign. So, yes, but here is perhaps where I would like to get in this presentation. The previous slides demonstrate some of the type of work, some of the type of the examples of enforcement that we are involved in this aspect. But here is the cherry of the cake, because in Apple, when this law, when the European Commission decided that this law has to apply to Apple and has to apply to Apple's mobile operating systems, more precisely iOS and iPadOS, the first thing that Apple did was to start a litigation against the European Commission to question first the legality of this law altogether. So Apple is questioning whether this article here, the Article 6.7 of this law, which concerns interoperability with software and hardware features, are constitutional under the European legislation. Apple claims that this article is inconsistent with the European Charter of Fundamental Rights. So basically, interoperability in this case would be against human rights, on their opinion, because it affects their right to property, their right to conduct a business. Let's read together this article. I highlighted the important parts. The gatekeeper, in this case Apple, shall allow free of charge effective interoperability with the same hardware and software features provided by gatekeeper. So this article is like a can opener, you know. So it tells that if Apple has control, if Apple control via the operating system the camera of your device, it should allow access to the control to competitors as well. If Apple controls the NFC chip on iPhone device, it should allow also others to have access to it, and so on. You understood? So, and Apple doesn't want to do that. They really don't want to do that, and therefore they are really fighting against this law. And we saw this a very important obligation for free and open source software. We saw this as a crucial element for smaller developers, for individual developers, for non-profit developers that are offering alternative software products and services to those that are controlled by Apple. App Store, for an example, right? Think about F-Droid, think about OutStore, think about the other many developers that they want to distribute the software on iPhone for users using iPhone, but they can't because they don't have access to these features and functionalities that are controlled by iOS, and therefore we requested to intervene in this court case. And the judge, it is on the highest court of the European Union, the court in Luxembourg, and the court granted the FSFE the right to intervene in this very, very important case. And we are being represented by Dr. Martin Huzovic, which is a professor in London and has been involved with the free software movement since forever. And our take on this case is that as society grows in complexity, interoperability becomes essential. Apple is being regulated from the perspective of the public interest, and therefore Apple should open it up, their system, to competitors. So they compete on trustworthiness, they compete on values, they don't compete only because they are vertically integrated and they control the device layer, they control the operating system layer, they control the app store layer, the hardware and the browser layer, and so on. You know, because they can do this because they do everything. As soon as they are putting this on the market due to their market power, they should not be the monopolistic entity controlling all these aspects alone, but they should open this to interoperability so others can distribute their software, distribute their hardware, and make it interoperable with iOS. And we do think that interoperability does not necessarily affect intellectual property rights. You know, it was pretty interesting because the European Commission, in the regulatory process for Apple, Apple claimed that interoperability would affect their patents, would affect disproportionately their copyrights. And the European Commission asked them and said, okay, so list your patents. If you have so many patents, please list our patents. And Apple didn't. They were not able to list the patents. And then the European Commission said, okay, so we will do a patent research ourselves and we'll see if Apple has so many patents that they see that would be impacted by this law. And the European Commission found just one patent that could be impacted by this decision. And the European Commission itself, took part also in this regulatory process, said, look, we are talking about the whole digital markets here. We are talking about the user experience of millions of consumers and users in Europe, and we are talking just about one patent here, you know. So we do think that this is completely consistent and compatible under the European legislation. So, but we are seeing this type of movements, this type of backslash being posed by these companies against this law, because this law literally tries to open up the infrastructure and make this whole so the competitors, proprietary or free software, can do this. And that's why we are doing this outreach for developers, for SMEs, to free software companies, to use this moment that the European regulators are looking, and they are desperately looking for alternatives. And this is where the free software community should also engage and produce alternatives So we can have fairer or more fair and more contestable digital markets. And therefore, I'm reaching the end of my presentation, the last part of my presentation, and I would like to write a homework for everyone in this room. You know, a homework asking you to become yourself part of this change that we are trying to achieve. And what is this change? So, last week, the FSFE has published a study where we analyzed 56 requests for interoperability from developers that they wrote to Apple, because this law also imposes on Apple the obligation, as I said, to provide access to software and hardware features and functionalities. And Apple came with a system of requests. So basically, developers that want to access NFC, or they want to access some API or some feature on iOS, on iPadOS, they should request Apple. First of all, they have to have an Apple account, they have to pay 99 euros per year in order to do so, and then when they do this, they submit. And we analyzed what are the outcomes of these requests. Until now, Apple has not granted, under this framework, no request. And we think that is pretty bad, you know. And therefore, we want to. And then we wrote this this report about the requests, and we sent to the regulators and said, look what they are doing. We do think that we need to enforce this law properly. This law is really, really important. Therefore, I would like, if you are a developer, if you are part of a startup, if you are working for SME or a company, that here in this conference, we see a lot of people working on the automobile industry. So if your company are having problems reaching some feature, software feature, an API, a hardware functionality that are being controlled by Android, Google Android, or by iOS, and you try to request access to this feature and you are not getting it, please contribute to our survey. We are doing this survey, we are analyzing the results, and we are making sure that your voice, the voice of the developers, reach the European regulators, reach the European decision makers, so we can make this law a reality, and then we can make this article in particular a reality. So free software developers, they have the same level of access to hardware and software features and functionalities that are controlled by the operating system, which is a pretty big deal. Okay, so and in parallel, this is the homework. But if you think that this type of work is important, please consider donating to the Free Software Foundation Europe. We are a completely non-profit organization. We rely on the donation of people like you. So yes, this is my message today. I thank you very much for your attention, and I open the floor for questions. Thanks a lot.
Okay. So there are a couple people with hands up. Yes. If it's not on, then
That's all. So there are different other legislations like chat control and native speech verification in the future. That kind of contradict that you should be able to cite because then you can circumvent those requirements and laws. How does FSC look at that?
First, not all of them would block the unfettered installation of software, or side loading, as you mean. Last week, actually, thank you for bringing it up, a colleague of mine from the Free Software Foundation Europe took part on TechLore. Perhaps you know this channel, a pretty good one, where we talk about age verification. And we are concerned about this, of course. This is a topic of interest and we are looking into it. But two things to consider. First, the legislation that is coming from age verification, chat control is a different thing. But for age verification, the legislation that is coming up, we are seeing this popping everywhere now in the United States, in South America, here in Europe as well. The ones that are popping up, we do believe that they do not contradict the unfettered installation of software. There were some GNU Linux distros that they were panicking and they were already removing, putting some geographic block on this, which personally I think this is very problematic, because look, if we are talking about this type of concentration, I do think that GNU Linux should be very important as alternative to that. And if we put geo-blocking on these regions because we think that we might not comply with this law, I think that we are just helping these companies to consolidate their monopoly there. So that's why the Free Software Foundation gave this development. Feel free to reach out, not reach out, to watch this very long interview. It's a 1-hour interview that we talk about age verification. And we do think that there are many, many ways, legal and policy ways, to interact with decision makers to make this type of law to not impact free software, especially the non-profit distros, like the Cyber Resilience Act. We managed to put an exception on Cyber Resilience Act here in the EU. We managed to convince the European regulators that free software works differently from proprietary in some sense, and therefore we need a special legal regime for this. So there is a lot of solutions that we can engage with instead of just already capitulating and leaving the market only to proprietary vendors.
Hi.
Yes?
Okay. You talk about Android and the monopoly of Android, so to speak, together with iPhone, iOS. Is there a way to distinguish Google Android and de-Google Android? I think that's a big issue, because to raise our voice and say we want support on our de-Googled devices, there needs to be a way to count de-Googled users. And I think it's sort of a catch-22, because people are switching because they cannot live without Google services. In Denmark, there's a law stating that if 2% of the users are using a specific platform, it has to be supported. So one way could be if we could make a de-Googled. If de-Googled Android and Linux phones, new Linux phones could count as one, it might raise to 2% at some point, and then it could be supported as one platform, so to speak, in a way like running Android apps on new Linux phones or running Ray and on Android de-Google phones.
No, thank you very much for that. I didn't know about this specific rule in Denmark. Perhaps we can talk a little bit more about this after the talk. This is interesting. But what you raised about counting the numbers of users on operating system based on Android, like Graphene OS, Calyx OS, and you name it, many of them are difficult. So we wrote a study, and it's about to be published in the coming months. And we try to raise some stats. And the project themselves, they don't have these stats. Some of them have. So I guess this is perhaps logistically a little bit tricky. But yeah, there should be a way to do this.
Another aspect, is there a way to find this triopoly or monopoly or whatever it is without the dependency of a centralized and probably corrupted system of the European Union?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have the slides here, but the software industry in the EU, it is small tech. So 94%, at least 94% of the software developed in the EU is done by SMEs and with less than 9 employees. So it is a plethora, a multitude of smaller companies spread all over Europe developing software. And so the development model is pretty different from Silicon Valley, you know. And considering all these developers, all these SMEs individually, they don't have the bargaining power to talk with Google, even the phone manufacturers. So what happened here in 2007, 2005 when Google Android emerged, and in 2012 when Google Android was already consolidated as the largest and the most used operating system in the world, is that Google was able even to impose lock-ins on phone manufacturers, not only European ones, but all over the world. And so our strategy is to find, the strategy of Free Software Foundation Europe is to find allies that can help us to establish device neutrality. The free software community is amazing. We go to FOSDEM and we receive a lot of support, and for example in our surveys, and we try to empower this community by organizing, building alliances, as we said. But at this moment, when the European decision makers, they are sensibilized to this, and I agree that there are pretty bad regulation out there, you know. We mentioned some of them here, like chat control. We are seeing this digital omnibus package, which aims to deregulate a bunch of things that we are pretty much concerned. There are much regulation against public money, public code, regulation that allows proprietary vendors to sell their systems to public institutions, and they do not prioritize free software. So there is bad regulation, and we recognize that. So we are not giving European Commission a blanket to say, look, we are aligned with them and everything that they do is good. But on this case, on the platform regulation case here that we are talking about, there are opportunities for synergy, and we are using this synergy to put free software on the agenda, you know. So yeah, so this is how I would answer to your question. I hope I answered this.
Thank you.
Any more questions? No?
I don't really have a question, but I've been sort of working in the phone industry for a while. I work for Nokia and Memo, and it's sad to see the market has absolutely abandoned the telephone marketplace. You know, there are a number of viable Linux phones out there today. Sailfish OS is actually just releasing a new phone right now. And I think Nokia never should have abandoned the market. I think they should have stayed with it and focused on it. I realize they felt that it wasn't ready yet. But, you know, private enterprise definitely has a role to play, and it might prevent certain EU regulations from having to be placed on the market. And I think that's the big missing factor nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, coming back to what happened, I mentioned some time frame, and I think this goes directly to your comment, especially in relation to Nokia, is these manufacturers, they knew what Microsoft did to the PC manufacturers a decade before, right? And they were aware that their hardware would be commoditized, you know, if they would grant all this power to one provider. And they did. So they followed the market trend. Perhaps they wanted to cut costs in the development of the operating system. But I agree that on the long term, I agree with your assessment. Yeah, leaving the market now puts all the consumers on this situation, to the point that we need to rely on regulation to restore some of the competitiveness of the market. Coming back to the question, I don't know what is going to be in 20 years. Perhaps I do want to believe that this regulation will improve the situation, and we are working seriously like this. This is only last year, you know, to make sure that at least when I go to bed, my conscience is clear to say, look, I did everything that I did for free software, you know. But we are experimenting as well, you know, and we do hope that in 20 years we will. This chart will be completely different, and here we will see another curve with GNU Linux phones, and yeah, this is my hope as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Lucas.
Thank you.